Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com with a introduction to SASS. Okay, and what SASS does is it's going to make your CSS life a lot easier. Now you do need to be good with CSS beforehand. So if you don't know what CSS is, cascading style sheets, and you haven't really kind of gotten very comfortable with it, I recommend you focus on doing that first. Okay, SASS shouldn't be seen as a way that's going to sort of shortcut you in being a good at CSS styling, but what it will do is it'll save you a lot of time because it'll introduce a lot of programmatic elements into creating your styles and allow you to compile them into a CSS style sheet where a lot of things you may end up having to repeat because CSS doesn't have certain functionality. You won't have to repeat. Okay, so here I have a very basic HTML page right here. Okay, we're going to style that, or I'm going to show you. I've already made the styles, so we're going to show you what happens. But you want to head over to the SASS website, follow the instructions for installation. Okay, you'll find it all here. But once you have it installed and it's all working, okay, we're going to use this command. So let's see what happens. So let's show you the HTML file. So I'm already linking to this index.css. Problem is, if I look in my folder here, there is no index.css, just this weird SCSS file, which is this. This is all my SASS styling. We'll go over that in a moment. But if I open up my terminal, so let me bring my terminal into the picture. Whee! Okay, what we're going to want to do is run that. Let's just make sure we got the command right. SASS, good. Okay. Make a file. I want to do this. SASS. So I'm going to put the original file here, which is the index.scsS. So that's the original SASS file. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to compile it into an index.css file. Okay, now I run that command. Okay, well, I probably shouldn't have put the square brackets there. But let me get rid of the square brackets, rename. So it should have just been index.css. But I look in this file. Oh, got it. Let me delete that in general. Delete. Okay. I don't need any of that. Same idea, except I get rid of all the brackets and stuff. So it's just index.scss, and I want to compile it to index.css. There we go. Now if I take a look inside index.css, okay, here are my styles. Okay, but we see that there was an error. So we'll go back and we'll examine the code. Let's take a quick look over here. Ah, got it. Okay. But essentially that's what that command does. It's going to take whatever CSS file you specify and then compile it into a CSS file, and then that way your CSS is created for you and you don't have to think about it. Now the resulting CSS is not going to be super easy to read, so you're going to want to continue compiling from your SCSS. But let's teach you some of the features that you get out of this. One, you get variables. Now CSS does support variables now, but there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff you can do with the variables here, and also just the way that you do variables in CSS sometimes can be a little awkward. But here it's pretty straightforward. I just go, hey, main. So what these are colors. So I have a main color, a contrast color, and an accent. That's how I usually set it up. So I've set up all my variables at the top of my style sheet. Here I'm setting up some padding and margin variables, so that way I don't have to specify the exact number of padding and margin. And the great thing about using the variables is that if I ever want to change the color, instead of me having to change the color to like 10 different styles, I can just change the color here in my variables, and it automatically applies to the rest of my style sheet because I'm using the variables. I chose my fonts, so here I have like a font that I'm using for like titles, a font that I'm using for like just normal text. So variables, that's very nice, very useful. Even better, I can use functions. So I can actually make programmatic functions to help me do things. Okay, so for example here I'm saying, hey, I'm making a function, and the function's called double the pixels. And essentially what it's going to do, it's going to take some number, whatever number I pass in, and double it. Okay, it is going to, yeah, just double it and return that number. Which, so then I can double my padding or double my margin when I need to. Um, Yet it's still all a function of my original global padding or margin, which is nice. So that way, if I decide to lower it, the doubles will lower as well. And then you have mixins. Okay. Here, let me just do this. Why doesn't that comment out right? That means something is missing, and I think that's here. Yep. There we go. Okay. The great thing about text editors is having all that syntax highlighting helps you catch errors. You gotta love it. Okay. So mixin. So mixin's what it does. You're defining a mixin. It's like something you can literally mix in. You know? So basically, wherever I use this basic transition mixin, it's gonna plop this in there. Why would I want to use that? It's because maybe a lot of my elements use the same sort of transition, and I don't have to be redoing that transition every time I have a different menu or whatnot. And even better, you could do a mixin that takes in parameters. So here I'm specifying a text color and a text background, and then I can plop those variables into my mixin, and then whenever you call that mixin, you can actually specify your colors. So for example here, what it does is that it's going to include our basic transition because I want to use that for my text and background for certain things. I specify the background color and the color. And then this is what's called a nested style. So here what I'm doing is I'm actually nesting the hover. So here it's saying, hey, whatever element I'm styling, when it hovers, I want to do this. And essentially I'm just switching the color and the background color, which the transition will allow the fade in a little bit and give it a nice little transition look. And again, if you haven't sat down and spent some time learning CSS first, a lot of this is going to sound like gibberish. So make sure you've learned CSS first. But the cool thing is, like in CSS, I would have to kind of define this as a whole separate style. So I'd have to write like a and then a hover. But now I can just plop this into any element and give it this effect. You know, a background color and a foreground color, and then a transition to that color. Over and over again without having to do minimal work. For example here, all I have to do is just slap in that text and background color, although I did not specify colors. That would be important. Okay, so let me use the variables we defined. So that's main and contrast. So let's just say main, comma, contrast will be our two colors that we're passing through from our variables. And then here again, I'm using the nesting. So I took my body tag and I'm saying, hey, any unordered lists in my body tag will be styled this way, and any lists in my unordered list in my body tag will be styled this way. But the cool thing is, then I have this styling here already, and it's automatically going to kind of carry over to anything that's within it. So I only have to add the additional styles every time I nest. It also just makes it visually easier to see sort of what you're styling. So that's very nice. You don't have to nest, but it's a cool feature. So the 4 features we talked about here is being able to nest styles, being able to use mixins. So again, I pulled in the mixin here, and that mixin brings in this, and then this brings in this. I got my variables and my function. Okay, and let me just do it here. Okay, so let's do this. I want to double my padding on the body. So padding, we're going to say double pix, which will be are we passing through the padding variable? Cool. And let's see if that works. But again, I need my semicolons. You're going to need to make sure you put your semicolons after every style here. So let me just clean up, make sure I'm not missing any semicolons. So we saw that caused an error before when we compiled. And good. Okay, so let's save it. Let me bring up the terminal. And let's recompile it again. So SASS index CSS. Okay, and then I bring up the index.css. And there you go. So you made it into nice normal CSS. So again, there you go. You see when I hover over the LI, it's going to change colors. I got my transition right over here. just basically the way what I did it, but I didn't have to type all that out. This is going to get more useful when you're doing a lot more elements and you're repeating the same things across a lot more elements. So probably right here, you're not necessarily seeing the full value of this, but you guys can get the idea. Imagine if I had to use this, if I had to type this out over and over again, but in here, all I would have to do is just really put that in there, and that would essentially achieve that over and over again across many different elements. So let's take a look at how the page ended up. I think that's right over here. Okay, and then look, I got my little transitions. Yeah, nothing super fancy. And I never styled that div, but whatever. But you guys get the idea of one, how to use SASS and the benefits of SASS. Okay, but again, SASS, you can never like link a SASS style sheet to your HTML. It has to be a CSS file, but you can compile your SASS to CSS. Okay, and allows you just to organize your code, be able to create the pieces you need to do what you need to do, which is really, really neat. So that's just a quick tutorial on SASS. There's a lot more to SASS. There's all sorts of built-in functions. There's maps where you can create like collections of variables. All sorts of really cool stuff in SASS. So hopefully this is a good introduction, and you use SASS, which, you know, a lot of frameworks will have native sort of SASS built in, so that way you can just use SASS right out of the box, which is pretty cool, like Angular does, and a couple other frameworks. So I'll see you guys later. Make sure to head over to alexmercedcoder.com. Okay, head over to alexmercedcoder.com and join the developer networking Slack, so that way you can meet other developers, read my articles, subscribe to my podcast, go follow, subscribe on my YouTube, add me on LinkedIn, and follow me on GitHub, because why not? I'm going to keep making really cool resources for you guys. Ciao.